Hey there, welcome to the DFS Build MLB edition. I'm Kevin Roberts, joined with Taylor Smith. We're going to jump right into an 8-game main slate over at DraftKings. Should be a lot of fun or absolutely terrible. That's just the way baseball works. Let's get into it, dude. Actually, first off, if we help you out in any way, please give this video a like and also consider subscribing to the channel. Helps us know that we're doing something right and also helps you get alerted to future videos. When NFL season rolls around, we will be doing weekly videos for that. And then also when NBA comes back. So stretch run for MLB starts now here, technically speaking. We got the Guardians taking on the Yankees at Yankee Stadium. We got Joey Cantillo. Is that his name? I never heard of this guy.
Presumably.
Okay. He's taking on the Yankees, and that doesn't sound great because they destroy Southpaws. And on the other side, we have Nestor Cortez taking on the Guardians. I trusted the Yankee pitcher yesterday. It went absolutely horribly. Probably won't make that mistake again today, considering the Guardians get a park upgrade. They have a 209 collective ISO, and they don't really strike out that much. On the other side, the Yankees also do not strike out, and they have a monster ISO. I think it's like 247. Let me check that. Yeah, 240. And they're facing Joey Cantillo, who I didn't even fucking know until just now. So I like the Yankees here. Not interested at all in the pitching. I'm okay with the Guardians too, but I don't really want to go out of my way to pick on nasty Nestor Cortez here. So it's Yankees or bust for me. How are you feeling about this one?
Yeah, I mean, the Yankees look good. Of course, Cantillo's not really the guy to be afraid of, it looks like, based on a small sample of numbers, not a strikeout pitcher. So yeah, obviously you can play them. I'm not getting them a ton right now. I assume they're going to be pretty chalky. I'm getting to Cleveland a bit. Very low strikeout lineup against Cortez. I typically play Cortez for better or worse, but I don't think I'll really be getting there tonight. Cleveland looks pretty good. It's a decent home run park. They've hit lefties pretty well, especially the top, 4 or 5 hitters in the lineup. Good numbers on the season against lefties. Cortez has been prone to home runs and fly balls and things of that nature. So I like Cleveland a good amount, assuming they're going to be the lower end of the offenses in this game.
Yep, logic checks out on that one. Next one, we have the Reds taking on the Jays up in Canada. Nick Martinez taking on Toronto. Not super interested in Nick Martinez here. I think the Jays are fine, but not super excited about them either. Yariel Rodriguez takes on the Reds. Reds strike out a bit, 25% K rate, so I guess he has that going for them. Just double checking the pricing here. He's at 7.3. I think of the pitchers here, I'm looking at him a little bit more than Nick Martinez, because what's Nick Martinez is a lot cheaper, but I think I would like the matchup more for Rodriguez. But really, this just isn't a game that I'm really gravitating towards at all. I think I would maybe play Rodriguez because of the price, but that's probably it for me.
I think he looks okay. I just don't really see the point in prioritizing him. Cincinnati does have some power in the middle of the lineup. It's not a great offense overall. You mentioned the strikeouts and all that, but he's okay. He's not a bad pitcher to begin with, so I could see the case for him. Not going to be a priority. Like you said, I don't really see the need to go out of my way to force anything here. I think Toronto's okay because they're cheap. Lineup's just not very good these days, which is a little problematic. So not going out of my way to get to them. Not going to force Cincinnati. Yeah, it's just kind of a blah game all around.
Yep, I agree. Moving on here, we got Phillies and the Braves. Two good pitchers. Aaron Nola taking on Atlanta. Max Fried taking on the Phillies. Division rivalry game. I think Fried was not so good last time he faced the Phillies. Let me double check that. Yeah, negative 0.9 fantasy points.
That was probably like opening day, wasn't it?
Yeah, true. But he's had 2 games against them. So overall, that's what he's averaging with a 10.8 ERA. And obviously, the Phillies are not an easy matchup at all. I don't think I'm going to let that get me off of him by any means, because he's 8.5K and he's one of the best pitchers on the slate. But it's still the Phillies. So if Fried's going to garner a lot of ownership, I think he's like top 3 in ownership at like 32%, something like that. So I will definitely have a sprinkling of the Phillies. They have plenty of power. And yeah, so I think that's okay. On the other side, don't really want to pick on Aaron Nola either. I guess the overall message here would be I'm okay with the pitching from both sides, but if they're going to be high owned, I will gladly take 2 very capable offenses at a little bit higher ownership than the field.
Yeah, I'm not really getting to Nola. His strikeouts have pretty much dried up. Atlanta's not at full strength. They have injuries, of course, but still not a pitcher I think is worth, 9,200 tonight.
Mm-hmm.
So not looking there. Phillies are my highest owned offense. I think this is a situation where I'm going to play both sides of it. Free being a good pitcher, and he's underpriced, like you said, but he's also not a huge strikeout guy. And the Phillies on the season, the projected lineup, 213 ISO, 380 WOBA, and a barrel rate of nearly 12% against lefties. So they've handled them pretty well. Obviously, it's a super talented and deep offense. You can include the lefties in the stacks. Harper, in particular, has fared well against lefties. So is Schwarber, for that matter. So there's a lot to like. I could see, it's easy to see them failing because Fried is good, keeps the ball on the ground, but there's enough power here to get to them, especially if the matchup is going to scare the ownership down.
Yeah, as they say in golf and pool, that's a lot of green that we see on this table here. So, yeah, it really honestly does not look that bad for the Phillies at all. I agree across the board here. If I'm going to get exposure to the offenses, it would be Phillies, but I do still like Fried. I'm in full agreement a little bit of both sides here because Fried at 8.5, a little bit tough to get away from.
It's slate, and Fried is one of the better pitchers, so
exactly. All right, so moving on, we got Cardinals hosting the Brewers. Tobias Myers taking on St. Louis. It is a pitcher's park, so I think we can consider him at 8K. I'm not super excited about it, but he's there. I guess that's a very ringing endorsement. He's there. Okay. So in the same breath, you can definitely consider the Cardinals on the other side, but not very excited to play them either. Kyle Gibson has been okay. He's a little bit cheaper at 7.8K. Brewers strike out at almost 23%. They obviously have a decent amount of power. But it is a pitcher park. So I think both pitchers are okay. I'm not super excited for either offense. If I had to pick a pitcher, I would just go with Gibson because he's cheaper, and I think he has a little bit more upside given his matchup.
Yeah, I agree. I think Gibson's playable. This is kind of like the Phillies and Fried thing where I could see getting to both sides. Gibson being cheap, and he has a pretty good ground ball rate, particularly against righties. So he could get some easy outs, some easy innings, things like that. But the Brewers are also interesting offense. Pretty good talent. They have a few lefties in there. Decent enough power, even without Yelich. So I think Milwaukee is kind of an interesting value stack. But on the other side, I'm not really getting to Myers, and I don't think the Cardinals are interesting at all.
Yeah, Gibson and Myers both averaged 14 fantasy points per game when facing the respective teams. I just think this has the makings of like a 3-2 ball game. It's just not an exciting game at all. But I do agree, if you're going to do it, it's going to be Gibson. It's going to be a split between Gibson and Milwaukee. All right, we have the wind blowing in at 5 to 10 miles per hour at Wrigley Field, so that gets me off the bats to a certain degree. The only thing is the pitching isn't amazing, especially on the Tiger side. So on Roto Grinders, it says Bo Brieske is starting, but then we have Kenta Maeda on DraftKings at 5K flat. Either way, not excited to play either of them. I guess Maeda with the wind blowing in at 5K flat is not, you can't like completely rule it out. I'm not really excited to go there if he ends up starting. Do you know for sure if either of them are starting?
It seems like they usually don't announce Maeda's going to pitch. Like they'll have an opener and then he might pitch long relief. So there's a chance he might not pitch at all.
Awesome.
Obviously, if he's pitching at 5K flat, then he's playable because he's 5K flat and he's not a gas can necessarily, but not great either. Taillon is 8.4, which seems a bit high for him. He's not a bad pitcher in the matchup. I think is okay against Detroit, but I feel like Taillon is not generally a guy I want to pay mid-8s for, but he's okay if you want to keep him in a large field tournament pool. That's fine. Detroit does have some decent power from the left side in particular with Carpenter, Green, and Meadows at the top of the lineup. So I think it's a decent enough stack. Colt Keith even you can throw there from the left side. So
well, we have been in agreement basically on everything to this point. This is where we part ways, my friend. I'm
not saying they're a great stack, but I do think they're stackable even with the weather.
Hey, let's get noisy here. Let's get real fucking noisy with some home away splits. Taillon, 18 fantasy points per game at home, 11 on the road. He's just a better pitcher at home. Sorry, but I'm not sorry. Okay, he just is. So that with the wind blowing in and the Tigers aren't that great with almost a 29% K rate, I like him, dude. Especially if Fried is going to going to garner ownership like he currently is projected to. Fried is in a way worse spot. He's $100 more. I love Jameson here, so definitely queue up. He's going to give up fucking 8 home runs today, but I think everything does logically add up for him on this slate. 8.4 for him sounds just about right. I like him quite a bit.
Yeah, all right, I think that K rate's been inflated by Trey Sweeney having a 57% strikeout rate and 7 appearances at the plate. But
that's true.
I mean, I hear you. It's a fine enough spot. I just think there's enough. It's not a great slate. But there's enough other pitching to where I think it's not necessary.
Yeah, that's fair. But I do. Okay, so we got the Royals taking on the Halos. I think it's in KC. Sure is. Yeah, we talked about this before we jumped on here. Johnny Cueto, the corpse, 38-year-old. He has looked good in the minors. Well, good is a relative term. He's averaged he had a 3.06 ERA or something. So he's been fine. He's been serviceable. Don't love his chances against the Royals, though. So definitely would not mind firing up Royals. The only thing I wouldn't like about that is if they are a very chalky stack, which they certainly could be. On the other side, Michael Lorenzen against the Halos. When I ran the system for the Roto Grinders optimizer, Halos were popping like crazy, which probably is just a price thing because Lorenzen isn't really a gas king. He's not a guy I like to go out of my way to target. He's just decent. And the Halos aren't good. So yeah, I'm basically Royals or bust in this one. How about you?
I'm pretty into the Angels as a value stack. I've been on them in this whole series to this point. So Lorenzen's pretty easily the worst pitcher they've faced. He's particularly atrocious against righties. And the Angels don't really have any lefties of note beyond Nolan Shonowell and maybe Mickey Moniak. So pretty righty heavy. I do think it's a good spot for Ward, Hoppy, and Neto in particular. I like that mini stack a lot against Lorenzen's reverse split. You can make a case for the full stack if you're paying up for something else, but full stack in the Angels is pretty vomity overall. Kansas City is okay. Cueto, hard to know what to expect. I don't think we've seen him in the majors all year. So historically, a pretty good ground ball guy. Doesn't usually get his ass whipped, but like you said, he's a 40-year-old that's been in the minors all year. So he could just be washed and throwing beach balls up there that get whacked. So Kansas City, kind of like the Yankees, looks like a good stack. Not necessarily one I'm prioritizing, but I don't think you're wrong if you do.
Yeah, good point on Lorenzen's splits against righties. Dear God, 211 ISO, 14% K rate. You're not wrong about that. The only problem is Angels kind of suck. So
yeah, but like I said, like Neto, Ward, Hoppy, I think you feel pretty good about that 3, at least on paper. So
yeah,
it's okay.
And then you feel real good about Rendon getting slid in there. Get him in there.
Just don't play Rendon. Don't play Rendon.
Yeah, you
can play Drury.
Tweak your, yeah. If he plays, he's always projected to play, and then he gets scratched. Always.
He does love to get scratched, just like Rendon loves to go on the IL.
Oh, you got Joe Adell there too. He's always fun to play. He either hits a home run or he strikes out 3 times. It's just which
if Lorenzen can't strike anyone out, then he should hit 3 home runs.
Oh, I'd be willing to bet he can strike Joe Adell out at least once. 31% K rate. So, all right. I agree with the splits for sure. I just don't really want to play the Angels, I guess. I don't trust them very much, and I would prefer Casey, but the logic is there. You're not wrong. All right, so we got a pitcher park here. Ryan Pepiot and Mitch Spence taking each other on with the Rays and Athletics facing off. Not really super excited about any of this. I guess Pepiot at 8.3K is fine. I kind of like Fried and Taillon a little bit more, but he's definitely in play. The Athletics aren't very good. Only 119 ISO against righties. It's a pitcher park. They strike out a good deal. I'm looking at the Rays actually right there. My bad. 160. Okay, so they have more power than the Rays, but they do strike out 25% of the time, and Pepiot's got a good K rate. Doesn't give up a lot of power in pitcher-friendly park. So I think he looks good. Not super interested in anything else here.
Yeah, Pepiot's probably my favorite pitcher on the slate for the dollar at 8.3. Great matchup, great park. Good pitcher in general. So I see the appeal there. I think he'll be owned accordingly. I could see him being the most popular SP2 on the slate. I think that's justified. I think Mitch Spence is also playable just because he's 6'5", and like you said, inadvertently, Tampa Bay has no power. They have a 119 ISO. They have a 24% K rate, a sub 300 WOBA against righties. So if you want something cheap, and we don't have Maeda necessarily locked in, I think Spence at 6'5" is perfectly playable. Not in love with it, but kind of is what it is. As for the bats, I think you can play Tampa Bay against him. It's been a rough go for them so far in the series, but kind of to be expected in this part, coldest weather on the slate also. But there are some decent hitters here, even though the overall numbers are pretty rough. So I think Tampa Bay is an okay stack. And I guess you can stack Oakland if Pepio is going to be popular, but I'm personally not really getting there.
Yeah, worth noting that Spence has been better at home than on the road. Not by much, though. Also, in his only matchup with the Rays, he had 22.8 fantasy points per game. That was his best game of the year by a good amount. So, yeah, I don't really want him at 6.5K, but the price point and the park and the matchup, everything checks out okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with getting him whatsoever. All right, last game of the night, we got the Mariners going to LA to take on the Dodgers. Pretty good pitching matchup, which would probably lower ownership across the board for both offenses. Logan Gilbert takes on the Dodgers, who are now finally healthy. They have Mookie Betts, they have Max Muncy, so they're pretty much full bore here against Gilbert. Gilbert is a good pitcher, good, decent strikeout rate, doesn't walk that many guys, doesn't give up that much power, but it's the Dodgers. So I actually like the Dodgers a decent amount just because I got to think the presence of Gilbert and their overall projection due to him is going to lower their ownership. So low-owned Dodgers, I'm always going to be in on that. On the other side, we do have Jack Flaherty taking on the Mariners. They do have a 26.6 K rate. So he looks really good. The problem with him, he's been awesome, by the way, too. 32% K rate. It's disgusting. He's been in really good form lately. I think 5 of his last 6, he's had 21 plus fantasy points. So he is definitely feeling it. The only problem is he's 52% owned. So absolutely would I be a little bit underweight considering he's the most expensive player and the highest owned player or pitcher on the board. And also the Mariners do have some power. So if he's going to be super chalky, we can definitely stack the Mariners a little bit and or just go a little bit underweight in Flaherty.
Yeah, I'm probably going to be around the field on him just because it's such a good spot. He's the best pitcher on the slate. Seattle's been an offense we picked on all year, mostly at home, but overall they still strike out a good amount. Flaherty, the best strikeout pitcher on the board by miles and miles. Like, who else on the slate can get 30 plus fantasy points? I don't really see a path for anyone else. So even at ownership, it's hard for me to avoid him fully. Obviously, you can stack Seattle and do like a Pepio Fried or a Pepio Tyon, whatever you want to do there, but the path of least resistance. The Dodgers always look good now that they do have Muncy and Edman and Freddie Freeman and Mookie back. It's a ridiculous, insane lineup. Muncy hitting 7th, Edman hitting 9th. Just good stuff all around. I don't really want to pick on Gilbert. I'm also not playing Gilbert. So stacking Dodgers is always fine. They're just expensive in general. So that's kind of the hindrance. You can't really play them with Flaherty easily. So I love them. I want to play them. I'm probably not going to play them as much as I want. But yeah, really no problems with them.
All right. Excellent. Fair enough. Okay. So before we wrap up here, let's go with our number one stack and our number one pitcher to build around. So ownership be damned. For me, it's going to be the Yankees here. I just think the park, the matchup, the numbers all look good for New York for sure. There are a lot of good other stacks to look at, but it's Yankees for me. How about you?
Mine's the Phillies accounting for ownership, just because Fried, I think, is going to be somewhat popular. And it is like their offense might be as good as the Dodgers, top to bottom. So just a sub 10% on stack with, you can get Flaherty, you can play Spence if you need the extra money. You can always punt with Kenta Maeda if you want some risk. But there are ways to get to them. Maybe a cheap secondary stack like Detroit or Tampa Bay. So all things considered, as of now, it's the Phillies for me.
All right. As far as pitcher goes, I think you kind of alluded to Pepio being your favorite overall pitcher based on price, matchup, and park. I like him a lot. I'm going to plant my flag with Taeyeon. 8.4K, $100 more. So if we look at ownership and Pepio or Freed or whoever else around that price range is going to be owned, that could be pretty interesting. You also mentioned Flaherty being the best pitcher on the board. Don't disagree with that. The 10.5K price tag and the 52% ownership for me, though, is going to make me go underweight. Who's your number one guy?
It's Flaherty and it's Pepio. And beyond that, I don't really have a lot of conviction.
All right, fair enough. All right, that's going to do it for us. Hopefully this helped you out a little bit, helped you get to some stacks and some pitchers to make you feel a little bit better about getting your lineups out there or running your optimizer tools. But yeah, so hopefully you get some good success tonight. If we helped you at all, give us a like and also consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll see you next time.